Welcome to the Wheel of Mind, the Wheel of Time point of view reread podcast. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 2, where we're reading Nynaeve Almira's points of view. I'm your co-host, Lajara Dane of the White Aja.
Hi, and I'm Giskel Simmers, a scholar from Ilion. For any new listeners to our series, I want to remind you that The Wheel of Mind is an in-depth character reread podcast, and we will drop random spoilers at random times, so this is your only spoiler warning. Today, we are examining The Great Hunt, chapters 8 and 23. So I'll get us started with chapter 8, entitled The Dragon Reborn. In the keep of Faldara, the day after the Dark Friend and Shadowspawns attacked and stole the Horn of Valir, Nynaeve could feel a storm brewing, yet it was a beautiful day outside. She knew now that the listening to the wind that she had done was a manifestation of using the one power, and her grasp on that was tenuous, yet she knew she was not mistaken. She felt that it should right then be pouring down rain, snow, and hail all at once. She really had no idea what this meant. Then she saw Rand al'Thor striding away at the other end of the corridor after his meeting with the Amerlin, and she struggled to get past the knots of people to get to him. By the time she reached the end of the corridor, he was already out of sight around the next bend. Nynaeve asked others where he had gone, then carried on an internal argument with herself as she searched for Rand. She felt torn inside, knowing that she should be back at Emmons Field and serving her people as the village wisdom, while at the same time wanting to stay and protect Rand, Perrin, Mat, and Egwene. She wanted them free from these Aes Sedai plans, but really she knew it was far too late for all of that. Was she still the village wisdom? Who was she? Nynaeve did not see Rand again, but she did find Lan. He was looking intently out of an arrow slit down into the courtyard. She studied him quietly for a moment, and he only became aware of her as she turned to leave. He wanted to talk to her. Quote, "We said all we need to say long ago, you and I. I shamed myself, which I will not do again, and you told me to go away." End quote. When Lan explained that he did not tell her to go away, only that he had nothing he could offer her because of his lone battle against the shadow, she replied, quote, "In any case, kings do not give gifts to village women, and this village woman would not take them." End quote. Lan was obviously angry, yet Nynaeve forced herself to match him stare for stare. He replied with, quote, "I will make you a gift, and you will take it if I have to chain it around your neck." End quote. Then Lan pressed his golden signet ring into her hand, the ring of Malkiri kingship. Not allowing her to give it back, he told her either to keep it or throw it away as she wanted, as he had no better use for it. Then he brushed a finger against her cheek, said that he hoped to talk to her again on the road to Tarvalon, and was gone. Nynaeve was surprised to find that Moiraine was standing right behind her. Moiraine said she had not heard anything that she should not have overheard, yet Nynaeve was still angry with her, demanding to know what the Amerlin had wanted with Rand. Moiraine gave an evasive Aes Sedai answer, and Nynaeve growled that she should already have rescued the boys and gotten them away from her. Moiraine replied that Egwene would then have had to go into Tarvalon alone, unless Nynaeve was coming too. You see, that was the only way that Nynaeve could gain her full use of her powers to use against Moiraine. Quote, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Did you think I did not know, child? Well, as you wish it, I take it that you are coming to Tarvalon. Yes, I thought so." End quote. Nynaeve tried to deflect again by demanding to know what the Amerlin had planned to do with Rand. Moiraine answered smoothly that the Amerlin had no interest in a shepherd, so it might be best not to speak too much about everything else, and that Nynaeve did not have much time to pack her things. Nynaeve was left alone to look at Lan's ring, well, her ring now, and fan her anger at what Moiraine had done to these boys, especially at what she had done to Rand.
We have a really important turning point for Nynaeve in this chapter because she has to admit something that's really difficult for her. Early in the chapter, she's still very much in denial about this, the fact that she's no longer the wisdom of Emmons Field. And we know she's pretty good, just like Matt, at denial. So she actually caught herself saying, "I'm the wisdom of Emmons Field" out loud.
Yes.
But at the next opportunity that she gets to talk to an Emmons Fielder, she asks Egwene to stop addressing her that way. So she reaches a point of acceptance out loud. She doesn't quite explain to Egwene the reasoning. She's still a little cagey about that. She doesn't say, I feel ashamed because I've abandoned my people and those types of things that she seems to be feeling, but she does openly admit, hey, maybe you shouldn't call me wisdom anymore. We're far from home. We're both kind of on equal footing now that we're training to be Aes Sedai. And I think that's a point of maturity and growth for her. So it's cool to see that so early in her arc. If we're thinking in terms of 14 books and this is her first POV and the second one, that's a pretty big step.
Oh, yes, it is. And I love how you have brought up before how Nynaeve and Matt are so much alike, and the fact that they oftentimes take an action or say out loud something that points them in the direction they're going when they have this internal dialogue, this when they're torn about something. And that's exactly what she does in this instance. As you said, she's stalking through the corridors looking for Rand. I am the wisdom of Emmonsfield. People just stop to look at her, like this crazy woman's talking to herself. Now, she does have the presence of mind to realize that she's talking to herself and
Yeah, true.
think about that, kind of internally comment on that yeah, basically she knows that's not healthy. Um, but she says that she comes to that conclusion right then. But as you said before the end of the chapter, she's realized that really she isn't. She was trying to fool herself because she wants to be that's the life she desires. But I think I think she has some not a prescience, but a sense that this is going to last a lot longer. It's not just
Mm,
a jaunt to Tarv Island, get the boys away from the Trollocs, then back to the Two Rivers.
yeah.
This is going to be life changing for her. I think her feelings for Lan are mixed in with that.
Hmm.
In a sense, she doesn't want to go back. She wants to remain around him for a while, even though there's nothing clearly defined about the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, they, they did not have the DTR discussion yet,
Right.
except for the fact that there can be no relationship. So, yeah, so she's still struggling with that, and that is something that a lot of people actually experience when we have these internal struggles between what we want to do and what we know we need to do. And oftentimes we don't just come to a single conclusion and stick to that. We bounce back and forth for a while. We try to have it both ways. And that's very common with people. Sometimes we will reach a conclusion about something and throw the past away and walk away from that path in life. But oftentimes it takes us longer to bounce back and forth. So there's a lot of realism to the way this is written, and I know it's to try to get some tension in her character and make it more interesting. And I think so when things happen between her and Lan, when they do finally become a couple, it seems like a completion to a long story arc. But
Mm, yeah.
I think it still brings a lot of realism because people really live these kinds of things out in some way.
Yeah. I think it does seem very realistic. And her rejection of his gift at first, at least verbally, right? Like, she takes the ring into her hand, but she's fighting with him about it the whole time. Um, to me, seems very sympathetic too, because as you were just saying, the last conversation they had about their relationship was basically him saying, "We can't have a relationship. It's not going to happen." At least that's how she read it. He's being, I think, a little disingenuous here, saying, "Oh, I never said that we couldn't be together." I'm like, you kind of did, though. I mean, you were definitely implying that.
Right.
So he's sending these mixed signals where he had this, very dramatic way of saying that they could never be together. Oh, I could only give you a widow's mourning as a wedding gift or something like that. Um, but here he's giving her this ring, and he's also being kind of cagey about what the ring means. He talks about it being a way for her to get protection or send a message to him in any way, but he doesn't say why he would want to do that. If they're not an item, why do you want me to be able to call you in any time, Lan? She's
Right.
I think justifiably angry about these mixed signals. And he it's interesting for him to be doing this at his big age of like 50 or something, I think. But I think it just goes to show how much he had shut off himself from feeling romantic love for anybody for so long. And she has also done the same thing, just for not quite as long. Because as the wisdom, that's something that she never planned to be able to do, is to be romantic at all. So, their tension makes a lot of sense. Their tension with themselves about whether that's what they want, and there's also a lot of just barriers for them that are circumstantial, like Moiraine is a huge one. And I think if Nynaeve weren't so enamored with Lan, she may not keep stoking this fire of anger at Moiraine for quite so long.
Right. And you see a lot of changes that come about in Nynaeve, but they're gradual. They're very gradual.
Hmm.
Um, the first time it shows her in the books at Emmons Field, it's not a point of view, but the first time that she's actually appears in the scene of the book, if you would, it's when Perrin, Matt, and Rand are sitting there talking about what they had seen as far as the Dark Rider and all
Hmm.
these dark things, and she comes up, hears the conversation, and basically berates them for being
Yeah.
silly and all these calling the Dark One's attention on them and things like that. So it's before the events of Winter Night, and she had been mentioned a couple of times in the book until then, but that was her first introduction.
Mm.
And then before you know it, when they get to Barrelon and Tom is playing the harp and singing songs, and they have this big square dance. It sounds like,
Yeah.
and the next thing Rand knows, he's dancing with Nynaeve, and he didn't know the village wisdom could dance. So the fact that she was away from everybody and what everyone expected allowed her to loosen up just a little bit and relax, be off her guard just slightly.
Mm.
And I think that continued as she starts admiring Lan and starts receiving admiration from him, and they both have these feelings. So we see these changes that gradually seep into her character. But the one thing that is a constant throughout it is her anger. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Nynaeve is a very angry person, but that's because she's a very conflicted person.
Hmm.
Again, she's very good at being a wisdom, at helping people, healing people, not just her occasional use of the one power that she hasn't been aware of yet. But well, I mean, she has at this point in the story of our reread. I'm sorry, but she
Yeah.
she has no control over it yet, I should say. Um, but she was very good at learning the herbs, and she knows the stuff. She doesn't have to consult, her little brown book that she carries in her pocket on different herbs. She knows these things. She
Yeah.
knows the dosage. She knows how to help people, and she loves doing that. That's her heart's desire. And uh, so we know she has that, but she has to deny other things that she wants and claim to herself she doesn't really want it. And that's
Yeah.
why she wouldn't dance at the village dances, because that's not something a wisdom really does. That's why she wouldn't let herself fall in love. That's something a wisdom doesn't really do, and what they really don't want in life. And all of these things that she's convinced herself she doesn't want, but when she gets out into the greater world, out of Emmonsfield, she discovers she does want these things.
Hmm.
And as you said, Lan is the same way. He shut himself off emotionally. He doesn't show emotion. He's convinced himself he doesn't feel emotion.
Right.
Now the emotions are there. Um,
Yeah.
I I define love as temporary insanity because
Hmm.
it does override, a lot of common sense and other things. And right now they are in this tug of war between their sense of duty, their common sense, and this desire they have for one another. And so, yeah, that's why just as Nynaeve is bouncing back and forth between what she wants in life, or actually trying to discover what she wants in life,
Mm.
Lan at a much later age has come to that same conflict. Serving his Aes Sedai, taking on his lone war with the shadow, his vow to give his life, and trying to fight the blight and fight the shadow. the sense of duty that he has for that. And now he's finally found a desire that he never knew he had, never knew he could feel. And so that's why he bounces back and does and says things like gives her the ring that against all common sense, that's not something he would do. His sense of duty would override that, but love is temporary insanity. So he's bounced back to that again. Now I guess I need to circle back around um, because I've chased this Trolloc tale around and around until we get back to Nynaeve's anger. Now, she still has that constant anger, but a lot of it, as I said, is at herself. But she's reflecting that back onto other people, and oftentimes in the wrong places. And that's how you know it's really she's angry at herself, and she's taking it out on everyone else. Um, because she tries to be angry at Lan. She feels like she shamed herself in front of him in earlier conversations. She's angry at Moiraine. She's angry at the Amerlin, whom she has not yet met. She's angry at everybody. Even angry at herself for leaving the people of Emmons Field. And but she's blaming everybody else for these things. All
Yeah.
the things that are happening to Rand with him being able to channel at least. She's blaming that on Moiraine. Well, really, that would be the creator, honey. Moiraine didn't start this with him. Moiraine just helped him discover it. Um,
Yeah.
she's angry at the Amerlin, afraid the Amerlin is going to hurt him, gentle him, do something that would destroy Rand's life, and that's not happening. The one thing I find ironic when I think about Nynaeve's interaction with Lan here, when she's telling him, I'm, basically ashamed myself in front of you. I'll not do that again. This relationship can't go anywhere. You said you didn't want anything to do with it. He gets angry at her. And they've
Mhm.
talked before how his stare, those blue eyes are like I think of it like a predator hawk or an eagle. It's very difficult to meet his eyes, but she forces herself to meet his eyes and holds on to her anger so that she can do it. And Lan, I think, responds to that as he would a challenge. That actually
Yeah.
makes him more attracted to Nynaeve, which is not what
Yeah.
she was right then. But yeah, she's woman enough to stand up and look him in the eye where most men cannot. So yeah, she's accepting that challenge. So he continually, I think, subconsciously sees her as being worthy of
Mm.
being the queen of Malkir. Even though there is no Malkir and it can't happen, they know it can't happen. He can't stop himself from thinking about it because she constantly shows herself worthy of that. And here she's just trying to be angry so she doesn't break down and cry or
Mm.
act a fool or all these other things. And and she is, but again, showing herself as being strong enough because that's the kind of woman he wants, and really the only kind of woman he can respect enough to give his heart to is a woman who is strong and who will not back down, who will not be bullied, and a woman who, in his mind, knows what she wants, even though she doesn't have a clue what she wants right now. That will come later.
Yeah, I think Nynaeve uses anger, not uses, experiences anger in a lot of situations where other people might experience a different emotion. Anger is one of the few things she allows herself to feel. And part of that, I think, is because she experiences anger in place of fear a lot of times, I
Yes.
think.
Yes.
And that's why she's sort of externalizing all of this blame onto Moiraine and to other people that really it's just circumstances that are under nobody's control. But it's harder to be angry at those if you know
Ah,
there's some kind of natural reason. Okay, that couldn't have been avoided. I think it's a little harder to be angry about things because it's not like a single person violated any kind of boundary, and
right.
so there's not a way to get recourse with just natural circumstances. And so many people might feel fear in this situation, but a lot of creatures of any kind, and you reminded me of this when you brought up the wildlife photographer thing several episodes ago in our last interlude season. Um, you said wildlife photographers advise to never approach an animal if you see that they don't have some other means of getting away,
Right.
because fear typically lets us get away, right? It lets us get away from the things that are threatening us. When we feel threat, we can either feel fear or anger in most cases. fear helps you get away. But if there is no escape, if you're cut off, anger is a good next resort to defend yourself. And you find
Right.
this with just about any animal. They're going to be more aggressive if they're cornered. I mean, this is even for domesticated pets or anything too, and also for humans. I mean, we have a lot of the same kind of architecture in terms of our fight or flight responses in our brains. And so I think that's part of the reason Nynaeve is so angry. She feels very powerless and she feels like there is no way of escaping these situations. But she also feels anger on behalf of her people that she cares about because she's felt responsible for them too. So that's another thing is she is upset that things have happened to them that she has no control over, not only threats to herself.
Oh, absolutely. And that can also be a learned response.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
I know people who respond to many situations with anger. They feel like that's one of the few emotions they can hold on to replace those other emotions. And sometimes it was because they were told, you know, you can't show fear or you can't, you know,
Can't cry, those
right,
types of
yeah.
things.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, can I cry? That's one I know some men that way. Well, and a couple of women as well that yeah, they
Mhm.
will always get angry because they were told as children you can't cry. That's it's what sissies do. Um,
Mhm.
my dad raised me differently. He was the strongest man I knew, and yet I saw him cry. And
Yeah.
he would tell me things like it takes a stronger man to admit that he's wrong than it
Mm.
does to keep going, and and things like that. So I did not equate masculinity with anger the way many people do, but they
Yeah.
can learn that, and it carries over. It becomes automatic. They don't think about it. They just respond that way. So yeah, it seems very natural that Nynaeve would do this because we know very little about her upbringing, except
Mhm.
that her father taught her to track and to be very outdoorsy. To kind of taught her all the things he would have taught his sons, and then he died early. It's
Yeah.
some kind of when she was very young, so he died at a young age. We don't know from what, but it made me think that perhaps that could be part of her motivation for wanting to heal people, wanting to help people,
Mm. Yeah.
and perhaps whether he taught her this or she felt like she had to learn it on her own after his passing, she felt like she had to be strong and could not show any kind of weakness. And so we don't know if that's something he taught her or something she learned from losing her father, but I think that was a big motivation. It never really speaks about her mother very much that I recall.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, really only in our next chapter is the only time I remember.
right.
And it's
So,
just they mention her name.
okay. Thank you. Cause I didn't even recall that one. So I look forward to hearing that. So she's probably been on her own and had to grow up very early.
Mm.
And so grew up kind of broken from that, and that's her way of dealing with it, yet we find that even though sometimes it causes all these miscommunications and problems, it does lend her strength, so, yeah, and I guess I would throw this out there for any of our listeners, if you feel like you're that kind of person that you can only, show anger, use it for the strength for the good things, but learn to relax that for the other things and not hurt those people around you because it doesn't
Mm.
always work out as good in real life as it does in the books. Um,
Yeah, but speaking of being able to harness it, we have profiled Moiraine as one of these characters who can channel her anger into a lot of appropriate places. She has a fiery temper, we know about her, but
yeah.
because of Aes Sedai training, she's been very schooled, and probably just court training before that even,
Right.
got quite a bit of schooling in how to suppress that, I guess, but she didn't lose it either. That's part of why she became a blue. They're very passionate about causes, and her cause has been from the very beginning finding and guiding the Dragon Reborn, and so she channels all of her anger into that mission and has this very single-minded focus. And I think that's where we find Nynaeve approaching more of a place of being at peace with her anger and kind of guiding it towards the places that matter and being able to let go of it a little more in other situations
Right.
when it's not serving the mission.
Right, yeah. Oh, that was well said because it made me think that it's not wrong to have anger, you just have to learn to focus it on the correct things.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, very good, I like that.
Well, those were pretty much all my notes on this chapter. What about you?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I think I've talked
Okay.
far too much, so if you would, take us on to the next chapter here.
All right. Chapter 23, The Testing, begins with Nynaeve waiting impatiently, of course, for her accepted test to begin. She was rushed to the basement room with a large three-arched ter'angreal that Shiriam cautioned her about. Third age Aes Sedai have no idea how to operate most such artifacts. Women have gone into this one before and never come out, or came out with their channeling ability burned out of them. After those comforting remarks, Shiriam told Nynaeve they were ready to begin. She had to strip off her clothing and walk through the first ring, remembering to be steadfast and that the way back would come but once. She walked through the first arch to find that she remembered almost nothing about who she was and had no idea where she was. It appeared to be a maze. After wandering a while to try to find her way out, she found she was being followed by a decrepit old man who declared not only that he was Agenor, one of the Forsaken, but that he had lewd intentions with her. And keep in mind, she was still not wearing any clothes. Rather than running away, she summoned fireballs and lightning to destroy him, but glimpsed a shimmering archway through which she somehow knew she must walk. Shiriam was there to find her on the other side when she recovered all her memories, and she asked the Aes Sedai whether her experience was real. The truth is, the Aes Sedai don't know, and they don't suppose it really matters, because its effects on the testee are real. However, it does turn out that it was incredibly dangerous and shouldn't have been possible at all for Nynaeve to channel in there. She shouldn't have even been able to remember that she could channel. So Shiriam advised her to avoid doing that on the next two trials, because that's a good way to get burned out. She was ritually washed clean of sins and crimes and ushered through the second door, where she found herself in Emond's Field, but it looked very unkempt. Marin Alvear was in her family's inn and seemed so relieved to see Nynaeve, but she was also fearful of being seen with her. It turns out a new bully of a wisdom named Melina had come into town since Nynaeve left, and she got Sen Bui elected as mayor, and all the dissenters and their family members mysteriously fell ill and many died. Nynaeve easily deduced that Melina was poisoning people and animals to keep the town dependent on her. Marin wanted to help get Nynaeve reinstated as wisdom, and tried to take them both to Corin Ayelin's house to get the women's circle gathered. But Senbui and Melina caught sight of them from across the green. Marin was terrified, begging Nynaeve to help her, but Nynaeve saw the silver archway, remembering that she should be steadfast and take the way back, so she walked through the door. After being washed clean of false pride and ambition, Nynaeve begged Shiriam to tell her it wasn't real. Shiriam explained that the ter'angreal weaves the trials from the students' worst fears, and that the White Tower uses it as a test to ensure that accepted will be sealed to the tower, unwilling to waver in their loyalty. Nynaeve thinks that's a lot to ask of a person, but she steeled herself to walk through the final arch, which Shiriam warned would be worse, and it was. She was in a beautiful wild garden with Lan, now king of a restored Malkier, and they were married with 3 children together. Nynaeve's memories and thoughts kept intruding into the idyllic scene, though, as she knew such a future could not be possible for them. Lan had already told her so back in the Blight, but her resolve weakened in his arms. She saw the shimmering archway, but watched it dissolve as she kissed Lan back and declared her love for him. The way back would come but once. She was supposed to be steadfast. There had to be a way back. She summoned all of her will and channeled to create a new doorway, and ran through it with tears streaming down her face. She reemerged into the White Tower with thorns stuck through her palms that Shiriam quickly removed and then healed. She came out of the archway cursing Aes Sedai and finding the closing of the ceremony ominous. This time they washed her clean of Nynaeve, the wisdom of Emond's Field. You are sealed to us now, said the Amerlin. And thus ends chapter 23, The Testing.
Of course, being a man, I really have no say in this, but I think it's patently unfair to Nynaeve or to any woman to allow them to enter into the amnesia holodeck, I mean, the testing Angaral, without being more prepared. I mean, you're asking them to be steadfast to the tower, to seal themselves to the tower, to prove their loyalty to the tower. She's only spent a few nights in the tower, and she spent months now hating Aes Sedai. So I'm very surprised if it were not for her, being so overpowered and leveling up so easily. I don't think she would have remained steadfast to that.
Yeah.
Because at this point in her life, I picture at least Nynaeve as having more loyalty still to Emond's Field than she does to the tower. Now she's going to the tower to learn to become Aes Sedai, to be trained, yet she hasn't had any training yet. Now, I think this kind of goes back to the the Aes Sedai thing of um, deferring to women with greater power, greater strength.
Mm,
That's one of the things that have gotten so many bad Amerlins elected in the past, that when
yeah.
they know someone really would not make a good Amerlin, but they're so strong in the power, and you've spent 100 years deferring to women who are stronger than you, so you just allow it. And then the same thing, they let her skip the novice period because she was so powerful, so strong in the power, but she couldn't control it, and she had no loyalty yet to the tower. So, in my mind, I wish the timeline could have worked out so she had spent maybe a short time as a novice, but been humbled somewhat and been willing to seal herself to the tower a little more. But
Mm,
all that being said, I guess you have to credit Nynaeve for being very stubborn, for even if she can't remember who she is or what's going on, to remember those words and remain steadfast, and find within her the strength to actually call forth the opening to escape in that last one when it's
yeah,
not what
that's
she
incredible.
wanted. Oh yes, yeah, that's one of those things that it really makes you perk up. I'm sure all the Aes Sedai there, if they could see everything that happened, would be like, "What do we do with her?" And,
Yeah.
Sheriam had to be salivating. If I can draw her into our group here,
Right?
oh gosh, how dark could she go? What all could we do if we can win her to our side? Yeah, there's so much to unpack here, and I know I'm barely scratching the surface, but that's the thing that really gets to me is that that's so patently unfair. Because number one, the easiest way to forget something is to tell yourself you need to remember this. This is important.
Yeah, yeah.
At
With
least in
no
my
other
mind.
types of reminders. I mean, she didn't even have like
Right,
a string around her finger or
right.
something. Nothing to tie her to the world outside.
Exactly. In fact, in making my notes for this, I had to Google up the word amnesia. I couldn't remember it.
Oh my goodness.
Because I
That's
felt it
that's
was
a fun
important. I
irony.
needed to remember it, and I get there and I'm like, Wait, what is that word again?" Forgetting, memory problem, all this stuff till I find the word amnesia because it was there. I just couldn't recall it. So anything that's really important, especially in times of stress, your brain tends to lock up, and the harder you try to remember it, the less likely you are to remember it.
Yeah, I
But
think we've all been there at some point.
oh, yes. Of course, it happens to me more and more as the years roll by, but we don't wanna discuss that.
So, Shuriam says that this Terran basically reaches into people's minds to find their fears and weave scenarios out of them. And so that makes me wonder what exactly each of these scenarios means that she's afraid of. I mean, some of them are kind of clear, but I wonder some about the Agonor one because she didn't seem too afraid of him. She attacked right away and seemed able to overpower him to a degree, or at least he was freaking out like, you shouldn't be able to do this, you're too powerful. And so I don't know if that's like the first test is supposed to be a little easier, or if, um, like, what is she afraid of there? Because she doesn't actually seem that afraid of Agonor to me.
Right. Well, I don't think she was when they met him there at the Eye of the World. She didn't have time to be afraid of him, really. I mean, I know he was
Mm,
creepy and
yeah.
all the things that he was, and she did go on the attack. But I think perhaps a lot of that came in later when she had time to muse over it and think about it and realize I faced off with one of the Forsaken, and he
Mm,
kicked my butt, and he really hurt Moiraine badly. And after he kind of got control of the situation, he walked through everything we did like we weren't even there. So at the time, I don't think she really had any fear of him. She
yeah.
was on point. Oh, you can't hurt my friends, and she goes into a full blown attack mode, which at that point, she's untrained and she's not good at it, but she tried. She reacted the way you should in a situation like that.
Yeah.
But then later, it sinks in these people that were, legends of horror and, used to scare people, the boogeyman, if you would, uh, who have been that for 3,000 years and whom I've been afraid of all my life. Didn't even really think they were real, but, I probably had nightmares of them as a kid. I know what they look like, some of them. I mean, I've actually fought this guy. So I think part of that, it was in her subconscious that she should have been afraid. perhaps,
Mhm.
or what would happen if he faced me again? What would he do, knowing my strength, knowing what he did before? So it was probably something that was kind of hidden and buried under there. But after thinking about it later, but I agree with you. The first test I think was less um, traumatic, and they get worse as they go.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was not a huge influence in her life, but this was an influence in her life. This was something that she wasn't aware of, but it was buried in her subconscious.
I read this somewhere and I don't remember where, so I wish I could give a little credit, but I read somewhere that it's not fear of Agenor at all that's supposed to be her fear in this situation. Maybe it's fear of running away from him and not actually facing down to defeat him. Um,
Ah, well,
because if you
good
think
point.
of other scenarios, um, she's afraid of having to abandon Emmons Field, and she's afraid of not, not being able to have this future with Lan. I think
Right.
it's the fear part is more of having to actually go through the doorway. That's the scary part. Not doing any of the other stuff while you're there.
Mm.
So maybe it's just that she would want to actually finish the job because she seemed pretty determined to do that, but she had to leave him. She had to leave one of the Forsaken running around out there. And we find that later she has to do that when she is pretty evenly matched against Mogideon.
Hmm.
And I wonder if it's because she's influenced by this test. I don't know, but she doesn't end up trying to finish her off. She leaves her tied up. And there's a couple of times where she doesn't finish the job and kill one of the Forsaken herself when she could. And so I wonder, yeah, I just wonder, the tower is basically saying you have to be one of us at all costs, even if it means not defeating the shadow as you see it. You might even have to run away from that because the tower is the biggest loyalty here.
Oh, I never thought of that. Yeah, I would thought maybe secondarily one of her biggest fears is appearing naked in front of the
Yes,
struggling
actually,
man.
that really could be the whole thing.
That,
My
that is
theory
a
could be wrong there.
that is at least a part of it. But no, I like your theory. I like that. Um, there's probably many layers to this, just as there are to many dreams. You know how it made me think of those dreams you have, years, well, or sometimes even when you're in school, of showing up to class one day and realizing you're naked. I think most
Yeah.
everybody's had dreams like that when they were young, and I kind of equated this with that to one degree. But, that became a minor thing, and I think you're right. The desire to finish him off, and she would have done it had the way not appeared, so she regretted
Hmm.
that. Maybe that was part of that regret that she's tried to stood up or stand up to him before, and her biggest fear was, not being able to defeat someone like that a second time.
Yeah.
And so I see that layer of fear in there as well. Um, yeah, I hadn't thought of that till you mentioned it, but that was very good. Now, when we look at her others, the things that Emmons feel, that's definitely playing on her fears of, what's happened now that I'm gone.
Yeah.
And we know it's nothing like what she imagined, nothing like what the Terangrial brought out. But she seems to, when she was in her element in Emmons Field, she seems to have a bit of a superiority complex. You know, they
Yeah.
they
True.
can't do this without me.
Yeah.
The men just think with a hair on their chests, and they're not going to be capable of doing anything. Well, in fact, the reason she came after Egwene and the boys is because the men's council was still arguing over who they're going to send.
Yeah.
And she just took it upon herself, well, they're going to be a day or two deciding this, so I'll just go handle it. So she really felt like they couldn't handle things without her. And oh, that reminds me of me and my career. I run into that quite a lot.
Yeah, many of us workaholics can feel that way.
Yep, yes, sorry,
Make
that kind
ourselves
of
irreplaceable.
yeah, that got painful as I was speaking. I feel like, yeah, no one else can do it like I do. It'll all fall apart without me. So she definitely is facing that fear there. But not just that fear of things falling apart without me, but who are they going to put in my place? And so this fear, it grows to not only is it someone who's incompetent, but someone who's actually malicious. And so we see her standing up to fight evil again. So these these things, at least these first two, always incorporate her standing up against evil, which I think
But
is a
then having to
desire
run
that
away
Nynaeve
from
had.
that.
Right, right. Uh, failing at standing up to evil. She
Yeah.
really struggles with the sense of failure, I think. Now I don't really know how that would tie into the third one. That one was just heart wrenching for me. Uh,
Yeah.
to see Malkir as this paradise, as this garden, and her love for land, the children, and I've woken from dreams before I had children, dreams about having children, and how much I loved them, and just it was so
Yeah.
overwhelming, and to wake up and realize none of that was real. It was very disconcerting. It was almost dizzying to go, to change that mindset from this person I love so much to I'm not married and I don't have children. And it was so strange. How can you feel something like that and have memories of these children, within the dream, have memories of them growing up and all these things. So it's 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 hard to comprehend. And I don't know, perhaps I'm strange. No one else may have ever done that, but I did experience
I'm
that.
child free myself, and I've definitely had dreams about having children. So
Okay.
that were deep and meaningful, and made me cry when I woke up and stuff like
Right.
that. So
Yes.
um, yeah, I understand that.
So that made that heart wrenching to me to relive that scene with her.
Yeah.
And if there's any sense of failure there, I guess it would have been in part of her knowing they could never have that, that
Mm-hmm.
Malkir was gone and dead, swallowed by the blight, and Lan was going to give his life trying to, destroy the shadow. And then we get to the end of the story where it makes us think perhaps an ending like that, or not an ending, but a story like that is possible in their future. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I want you to know that is
Yeah.
awesome to me. And we talked about that last week, I think, just briefly, but I had forgotten how that tied into her visions in the Terangreal, that is a possible future for her. But at this time, as she's going through it, it's impossible. It's you know, I guess maybe feeling like their love is a total failure. It can never happen. It can never take place. Um, but it was still difficult for her to run away from it. And that one I just found so heart wrenching. It's hard to keep my eyes from sweating when we go through that one.
Yes. Yeah, I think her fear here might be fear of letting go. I mean, she's afraid to actually let go and let herself experience some joy because there's no time for that. They have to save the world. All
Right.
this stuff with Rant and Moraine and stuff is still not resolved. And um, it's interesting because this one is slightly different from the others. It's like reverse in that with the others, she had to, in order to pass the test, she had to run away from fighting evil. In this case, she has to pass the test. She needs to leave so that she can go fight evil. She can't
Right.
live in this utopia where that fight outside still isn't won.
Right.
So yeah, this one is different, and it's interesting to me that it's the third and this presumably the worst one because for me, the one that hurts me the most is the second one. That's the one that's most heartbreaking. Thinking about are these real alternate universes or something where she's actually having to abandon these people to this awful fate. And Egwene has to think about that too during her test because she
Yes.
has similar discussions with the Aes Sedai about whether these things are real. And she seems to care so much about her people. That's a part that's been a part of her identity much longer than she's known
Right.
Lan. So I'm curious as to why the Lan one is the worst one. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Uh, no, other than just that dream of love and family, and this idyllic setting is so attractive to her. That's
Yeah.
something she wants more than anything, but really can't admit to herself.
Right. I think it's that she's had to not admit for so long. She's had to repress
Right.
wanting romance at all. Yeah, I think you're right
Absolutely.
about that.
Yeah. Well, just as Lan has done for all these years, she has put her sense of duty ahead of anything personal until she really both of them felt like they had no personal life.
Yeah.
And now they both have this desire that they're struggling. What do I do with this? Um, so yeah, it, I don't know. To me, it's just so real because I understand that falling in love is life changing, and you feel like no one has ever experienced this before in the history of the world, when
Yeah.
when actually most people have. But it it is. I said life changing. It's world changing to you because it changes your view of the world, and that's what they're going through for the first time. They've just never done this. She never had a crush on the neighborhood boy because she knew she couldn't, so she put all of that out of her mind. And he had flings, but he never gave his heart to anyone because he couldn't. He knew he couldn't, and he refused to even dwell on those thoughts until they got to the point those thoughts would not be ignored. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but that to me, I feel like I can understand that pain because growing up as a child, of course, I wanted to be a superhero and everything else, but I wanted to be a father and a husband. That was
Mm.
just my life goals more than career, more than anything else. So to imagine having a vision of that and losing it would, I mean, that's just crushing to me. So even
Mm.
discussing this becomes a little difficult and I struggle for words because that I feel that pain. You know, Robert Jordan, you hurt me with this chapter really badly. You wounded me in this one.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think I have anything to add because I think we've talked quite a bit about Nynaeve's repression and the way she externalizes everything as anger because of that, and her feelings of helplessness. This testing is very traumatic. It's interesting that everybody in the towers had to go through something like this.
Right, right.
But it's also just cool to see that her response to it is to just about break the test. I think that that says a lot about her and kind of bodes
Yes,
well for these sort of all the sort of rule breaking she's going to be doing with
right.
regards to the traditions of the White Tower from now on.
Yeah, yeah. And it's good to know she's not afraid of the Forsaken because this is not the last one she runs across.
Exactly.
Oh, that's our girl. That's our girl, Nynaeve. I really respect her more and more the more we delve into her character, and I try to look
Hmm.
at these things because she's not just my overbearing older sister. She,
Right.
she, I have to bring that up every episode. I know.
Yeah, she's got to be a challenging read for you because of
Yes,
that. But it's always taking the closer look, like we do here, always
right,
kind of gives them a little more redemption in my
right.
eyes, or
Yeah.
just at least you understand the reasons why,
Right. Oh, yeah.
and they
Yes,
can be
so
less
much more.
irritating.
Yes, so much more depth to them, right, as we go on and discuss them, but I like her more and more, and I'm eagerly awaiting to discover more changes within her because we do see things change, and this testing was a big turning point for her, but it's
Hmm.
not the only one, and it's not the one event that changes her life, but it is a turning point, and I think it we start to see her focusing her energies and her anger in more positive ways. But it's a process, and it's going to take us a while to get there. But I do like that about her. I do like seeing her strengths, not just her stubbornness. So I hope all of you will join us next time for episode 3 when we'll cover The Great Hunt, chapters 42, 45, and 46.
Wheel of Mind is written by Lajara and Giskel and produced by Lajara. Our theme music was composed by Wendigo. You can find his new Lairs EP on SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube, and I'll put those links in the description. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Mind, but this is an ending. So to catch a beginning next time an episode drops, subscribe to us, The Wheel of Mind, on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, or Spotify, and you can also find our episodes on YouTube under the channel name Lajara Dane. That's LajaraDaYne. To leave feedback, you can rate and review on whichever platform you use to listen to us, or you can contact us at lajaradane@gmail.com or at @mine_wheel on Twitter. You can also support the show by subscribing to us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/wheelofmind.